So I said in the last pod, the one I did with my friend Chad, that I had 5 waiting to be released. So here's number 2 of the 5. I've got some other things that will be coming interspersed between those last 3. But this one is with my lifelong friend, Kevin Moon. Kevin and I were in the same kindergarten class. We graduated from VIT in 1989 together. We've known each other our whole lives. And Kevin's a person I've wanted to get on the podcast for a while because he has an eclectic taste in a lot of things. We have very similar tastes in some things and not so much in others, but just the kind of person that when you visit with him, he's always got some perspective, or he knows a lot about a lot of things. So when I asked him to, I said, hey, I need to get you on here, when he started talking to me about my podcast, not wanting to actually be on it, just talking to me about it. Thankfully he changed his mind, and he had some ideas of topics that he wanted to do, and we're going to get to those, coming up soon. But the first 3 we did together on a Sunday afternoon back at the end of September. One of them, this one, was a great idea, and I loved researching it and looking back. The internet's a great thing sometimes. And he wanted to do greatest television series, television shows of all time. And I knew he would have a list, and his would be, all over the place. I knew mine would be kind of in a certain wheelhouse, growing up in the 70s and the 80s. And then obviously being an adult-ish during the 90s. I don't watch a lot of TV now that doesn't involve Guy Fieri cooking something, or Bobby Flay trying to beat Bobby Flay, and sports, of course. But it was fun to research this one. It was fun to look back. I should probably post my entire list. Some of those 80s shows that I completely forgot about. A lot of memories of watching television with my friends and my family growing up. So this episode being, while I'm sitting here drinking coffee out of my Ted Lasso mug, spoiler alert, given to me by my middle child for Christmas last year. It's a fun one, and I hope you enjoy it. I'm glad that Kevin sat down. Make sure, as always, I ask for comments if you actually listen. Like 11 people listened to the last one, and maybe I clicked on it twice and they counted those. But if you listen to this one, let me know. Let me know what I missed. Let us know what we missed or what you agreed with. So without further ado, the greatest television shows of all time on the Anthony Wherley's podcast. In my head, when I started this, I was like, who do I need to have on this podcast? Who are the people that I need to sit down with and talk about the things that I wanted to talk about on my podcast? And I wanted to talk about music. I wanted to talk about movies. I wanted to talk about TV. I wanted to talk about sports, coaching, teaching, blah, blah, blah. Well, today, thankfully, I have a lifelong friend sitting across from me, someone that I grew up with, someone that grew up in the country further out into Fulton County than I grew up in. We were in the same kindergarten class. We've known each other forever. So across the table for me today, my fancy table full of memorabilia that I hope people look at it and try to figure out, why is there a croquet ball sitting on top of a prom glass? It has a significance.
I don't know the croquet part.
My friend, Kevin Moon, graduate 1989 from the VIT High School, is with me today. I'm glad to have you here, my friend. It's good to see you.
You too. Thanks. Good to be here.
Yeah. So when I told you I wanted you to come on and we talked back and forth, you threw topics to me. I didn't throw topics to you, which I loved the idea, and we're going to get into it in another episode. We're going to record like 3 of them today, but we're starting with this one. I love this one because I haven't talked to anyone about what we're going to talk about today. So our first podcast episode together, the Kevin Moon, the Anthony Wherley, is favorite TV shows of all time. So we've decided that we're going to start it out in this way. Let's throw out things that we loved as a kid. We're not going to include things that are in our top 10 or in our just missed or on. I have a little bit of an honorable mention, and maybe you'll be able to morph into that as well. But TV, when we were kids, it was kind of a big deal. I think we can get into that. I was thinking about it the other day, and I'm interested to see what you think about it. TV, when we were kids, a really, really popular show might be on a Friday night. They didn't stay away from a Friday night. They were on Friday, the night that people would go out to eat, go out for pizza or go to a high school football game or whatever. That's what's odd is you wouldn't think something, if you were wanting viewership, why are you putting it on Friday night? Do you remember that?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't really ever go out anywhere at the time. So I don't know if it meant, yeah, Friday night I think is traditionally known as the death slot. I think for broadcasters.
Right, because it wasn't like Cheers was a Thursday night, ER was a Thursday night.
Yeah,
but I remember. I know when we were kids, Miami Vice was a Friday night. I know it was. I know there were other really popular shows that they aired on a Friday night at 8 p.m. when people would have been at a high school football game, or they would have been, again, gone out to Happy Joe's or whatever, since we have our nostalgia on my table here in front of us. So what are some of the shows that are on your list that didn't make your top 10, didn't make your just missed, but you remember from being a kid that you really enjoyed?
Well, yeah. So as a kid, TV was a huge part of my life. I mean, I spent a good deal of time outside as well. I think we had a good balance as kids, absorbing pop culture and television and radio and all that, but also spending a lot of time outside. But TV was a huge part of my life, and really, you tie a lot of your childhood memories to TV shows, and you're talking about TV shows the next day in the bus or something like that.
Right.
But I made a list of some of the shows that I remember and loved as a kid. For example, The Dukes of Hazzard. That was huge. These are in no particular order, by the way. So some of these will be Mondo popular with everyone. Others will be like maybe you never even heard of it, or
right.
But I also used to love the show Voyagers. That was on for like
right.
a season or two. I don't know if you remember that.
Mm-hmm.
The Greatest American Hero. The Powers of Matthew Starr.
That name sounds, because that makes me takes me to the fact that somewhere in this house is a fall preview TV guide. I don't know if we can have this conversation without bringing up the fact that TV guide was such a big thing when we were kids. Like there was no guide on the television.
You had
didn't
to
press
have
a
that.
button. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So your parents or my parents got the TV guide in the mail for, whatever the next week or 2 weeks, or I don't remember what it was, but there was a fall preview. Somewhere in this house is a fall preview TV guide that talks about the shows that are coming on. And you mentioning that one that I don't remember watching it or who the star of it was, but I bet you it was in that as a thing to let you know, hey, here's something coming up in the fall, kind of probably this time of year, actually. Wouldn't have been September when
it was exactly this time of year.
Right, this time of year when new series would be starting. So yeah, I don't remember Matthew Starr, but I remember hearing that name. So
I think Peter Barton was a star, and I think Louis Gossett Jr. was in it.
Right.
I think.
Okay.
I think you remember Knight Rider,
of course.
Chips, Zoom. Remember the 1970 show from PBS?
Uh-huh. Yep.
And when it went off the air, then its time slot was taken over by 3-2-1 Contact, which more people remember.
I was just thinking that. I think didn't we?
More people remember that
I
one.
remember watching that in grade school on, I think someone recorded it, and I remember them showing us that, and we watched it at home then. Yeah, absolutely. It just popped into my head when you said that. Yeah.
I was obsessed with that. I had the Zoom catalog from 1972 that my mom had, that she got like in a pledge drive in 1972, and I grew up reading that. Of course, here's a trifecta of after school shows that really shaped our lives: The Brady Bunch, Gilligan's Island, I Dream of Jeannie. I think we all watched those after school, probably. Those were huge. Yeah. Just a few more. Real People.
Yep.
That's incredible.
Byron Allen? No? Yes? Who was on that?
Yeah,
wasn't that like a...
Oh, That's Incredible?
Yeah, well, that's incredible too. Were they very similar?
Oh, no, Real People. Byron Allen was on Real People.
Yeah,
Real People was the first four people were Sarah Purcell, Skip Stevenson, Byron Allen, and John Barber.
Yeah.
And then I think Fred Willard and Peter Billingsley came on after that. Peter Billingsley played on A Christmas Story. And That's Incredible was John Davidson, Fran Tarkenton, and Kathy Lee Crosby. But they were, for you younger listeners that have no idea what these shows are, these were like sort of reality shows. Real People was, more sort of like lighthearted and humorous.
Yeah.
And just about normal everyday. They'd have segments like stories about everyday people, and some of the wacky things they did. And That's Incredible was more
right.
Ripley's Believe It or Not kind of crap, maybe supernatural and stuff like that.
Yeah, I remember those shows. And That's Incredible was a big deal. Obviously, Ripley's with the Jack Palance was, something to watch. So, yeah. So those are some good things there that you listed that I remember from our youth.
Or not just supernatural. I mean, like they could do like incredible things, like maybe like Guinness Book of World Records type stuff.
Right.
Here's the big one, Happy Days. That cannot be denied. I think Fonz was the 70s.
Right.
Basically, he was the face of the 70s. Batman.
66.
66 through 68. We just missed that, so we did not watch the first run episodes of that. That was all reruns. And then I've got one Saturday morning cartoon on there just for the heck of it. The Superpowers team, Galactic Guardians, which ran one season, 85 to 86, our freshman year of high school. That was the very last season of what had originally been the Super Friends, which we grew up watching
right
ever since the early 70s. But that last season, that was the final iteration of the Super Friends, I thought was really interesting. And I wasn't watching Saturday morning cartoons as a freshman in high school at that time. That was like the one exception.
Right.
But I thought that was like the most realistic to that time. That was the most realistic. I was really into comics at that time. That was like comic books. So that was true to the comic books, I thought, truer than the Super Friends had ever been. So those are just some random shows that I had as a kid. I'd love to hear what you've
I
listed.
cheated a little bit, and I Googled TV shows, and I found a site that had it listed all kinds of junk.
Oh, that's not cheating.
And I have this humongously long list.
Go for it.
Of things. I'm going to throw them out. And
All
if
right.
you're listening to this, remember, if you really, that's what you're doing? Yeah, it's my podcast. So rapid fire at you. These are the things that did not make it, but I had to put on my list. Hee Haw. Hee Haw was a weekend staple. I'm not saying it was good television, but
no,
you watched it.
My dad watched that.
Yeah,
so
it was. And again, not saying it's great. A show called Succession was on HBO recently ended. Great cast, depressing, but good show. How about Night Court?
Oh, yeah.
How about Family Ties? Mm-hmm. The show Soap.
Oh, yeah.
Soap was good. We were too young maybe to get some of the humor, but many famous actors that were on it. Blossom.
Yeah.
I like the show Blossom. Rhonda's a big fan of Love Boat.
Okay.
The Love Boat, which makes you think of Fantasy Island.
Yep.
Right.
They're a pair, basically.
Right. The A-Team when we were kids.
Oh, my gosh.
B.A. Baracus. Come on.
There you go.
Mr. T. You said Knight Rider, Dukes of Hazzard. Dukes of Hazzard was such a big deal when we were kids.
That was so huge.
I swear that was a Friday night too. ER. ER was a great show, I thought. And again, some of these might be on your list, so that's why we're going quickly past them. Magnum P.I., Tom Selleck with King. Give me that Ferrari. The Jeffersons.
Oh, yeah.
Newhart.
Yep.
Bob Newhart's hilarious. Mary Fran, beautiful.
Yep.
Got to have that beautiful woman in your show. Taxi. I wish Taxi was something I was older and probably would have got. That's an ensemble cast that was, I probably don't appreciate that enough because I was too young. How about Simon and Simon?
Oh, yeah.
Denny Wherley loved Simon and Simon.
I never watched that, but I knew
My
very
dad
familiar
loved
with
it.
Yeah.
Barney Miller.
Yep.
Three's Company.
Oh, my gosh.
The Muppet Show.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Facts of Life. Oh,
Watched the heck
boy.
out of that.
Facts of Life, it was a big deal. Square Pegs.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Laverne and Shirley.
Oh, yep.
The Fall Guy.
Yep.
I love Heather Thomas. Heather Thomas.
I think that came on right before The Greatest American Hero, I think.
Heather Thomas and Marky Post ended up on that.
Was Marky Post in that?
She's an angel. She
darned.
was an angel, yes. Buck Rogers.
Now that's,
Buck Rogers.
My brother and
Gil
I watched
Gerard, right?
we
That
watched
guy's
the
name,
heck
right?
out of that show.
Aaron Gray was all these shows. They had a female lead that young Tony Wherley just had a huge crush on.
Now,
she was just Speaking of angels, Aaron Gray, angel.
I mean, you're not wrong, definitely, but I was all about Princess Ardala. That was Pamela Hensley.
Oh, really? Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yep.
That's the one for me right there.
Dad loved Airwolf.
Oh, my brother did too.
Jan Michael Vincent. Right. Yeah. Dad loved that show.
Yeah.
Alice.
Okay. Watched a lot of
Linda Lavin, right?
Linda Lavin.
Vic Tayback.
Vic Tayback was
right?
Mel. Yeah.
Kiss My Grits.
Polly Holiday Flo.
Yeah.
She had a spinoff.
Right. One of my favorite James Bonds was a guy named Pierce Brosnan who jumped onto the scene in Remington Steele, right? Bosom Buddies had a guy named Tom Hanks before he became Tom Hanks.
I've never heard of him. I know Peter Scolari pretty well.
Peter Scolari was a big guy.
He was way famous.
Right, yeah. The sarcasm, if you're watching these, both of us delve into the sarcasm every so often.
Just a bit.
How about Head of the Class?
Okay, with Howard Hessman?
Yeah, Howard Hessman going to come up here in a little while. Hardcastle and McCormick.
Oh, gosh.
Hardcastle and McCormick had a fancy car. It was about cars and pretty girls when we were kids. Yeah. And at one scene, the car goes underneath a semi-trailer because it was low profile. I'll never forget that. I think Brian Dennehy was one of those two characters. The other guy, I can't think of his name.
I want to say it was Brian Keith.
Brian Keith, right? Yeah, right. Who's Brian Dennehy?
He's a character actor.
I'm gonna have to Google. I'm gonna have to Google that when you're talking.
He was
later.
in the First Blood. I think he was the sheriff.
That's the guy I'm talking about. Yeah. So, The Equalizer, the first one. British guy. Dad loved that show too. A lot of this for me was a little bit of going down my dad's memory lane, which includes the next one. The Master had a guy named
Lee Van Cleef.
Lee Van Cleef.
Yep.
And Dad and I were big into ninja movies.
My brother loved that show.
Yeah, my dad and I watched that show together. China Beach. Dana Delaney.
That was on when we were in high school.
Yeah. Rockford Files. James Garner, right?
Best theme,
cool
great
guy.
Theme song.
Yeah.
Great theme song.
Sanford and Son.
Yep, another great theme song.
You can't beat Red Fox.
And Damon Wilson.
Wonder Woman.
Oh my gosh,
Linda Carter.
Boy howdy.
Again, I hate to be that way. I'm not trying to be trying to be misogynist about it, but they did. You said yourself, I Dream of Jeannie. You just did when you were a boy, because next is I Dream of Jeannie.
She's all right for a human.
Right. 4 more. Hogan's Heroes.
Okay.
The next one, Who Loves Ya, Baby? I got the guy's hairstyle, and I love Tootsie Roll Pops as well. Different Strokes didn't make my list, any of my lists, but we watched it all the time. And then V.
Oh my gosh, heck yeah!
Talking about the V,
the two miniseries,
reptilian aliens come to Earth, and boy, we sat at the edge of our seat. I did anyway.
That was awesome. You had the two miniseries, and then it was spun off into a weekly series for a season.
Yeah,
so
my mom and I loved that. We watched that all the time.
Oh yeah, I like how they were actually lizards. So
okay, so somebody watching this, listening to it, whatever. You're now like, how did you leave those? How are those not in your top 10? How are those not in your top 15, counting your 5 just missed? And I have a little group of special mentions. Well, we did. We left all of those off, unless something I named is on yours and you're going to surprise me.
It'll be interesting to see how much overlap we have.
Right. So here we go. We're going to go top 10. We'll stop at 2. You'll give me your 5 just missed, and then we'll drop the bomb of the number 1 greatest television show of all time?
I've got a few more than 5 honorable mentions, but
Okay, that's fine. That's
I'll
fine.
rapid fire them.
That's fine because I also have I have 5 special mentions.
I'll rapid fire them.
Okay, so let's go number 10. So since it's my podcast, you go first. What is your number 10 greatest television show of all time, Kevin Moon?
All right, so a few of these I do have some ties, but they are all grouping like items together. So they're logical groupings, and it worked out really well because they're exactly where I would have put them on the list. But this is like a 3-way tie. I've got the IT Crowd. Are you familiar with that show?
I don't think so.
2006 to 2010. It was a UK show on the BBC channel. Arrested Development,
right,
from the 2000s, and then finally Police Squad.
Police Squad is amazing.
82, and you know what Police Squad's famous for spawning.
Right, yeah, the Naked Gun series, right.
The Naked Gun movies.
Yeah.
So all 3 of these shows are very intelligently written, wickedly funny, subversive, and offbeat. They're all kind of offbeat, but they're all kind of got like a wacky kind of sense of humor, especially if you watch Police Squad, that's just like rapid fire gag a minute.
Yeah, so I mean, basically made by the same people that made Airplane as well. Like,
exactly,
it's that same vein. If you've never seen Police Squad, but you've seen the Airplane movies or the Naked Guns, it's a television version of that.
Right, the Naked Gun is literally the spinoff from Police Squad. So if you've watched the Naked Gun movies,
Nielsen is a genius, or was a genius, and such a huge part of all of that.
So those are kind of, irreverent humor, and
right.
I love those. So I recommend them if you've never seen them.
Okay.
So recommend all these.
So my number 10 is mentioned on your list that you've already read.
Oh.
I'd get off that bus and you'd run up to the house, and because you and I both lived in the country, so we had to ride the bus to school. And I would sprint up to the house so that I could see a show called Gilligan's Island. Is it great writing? Was it great theater? Nope. It's a 3-hour tour. They get stranded on an island. They're making a radio out of a coconut. You've got, just the cast of characters. I love that show. I think of it, it will randomly come up in conversation because I'm weird and a ding dong. And it's one of those things where I just love the characters of it. And I think back to different things. The one where they had the radioactive seeds and they planted the seeds, remember? And Marianne could see for miles away because she ate the radioactive carrots, and Mrs. Howell could clean the hut super fast because of the beets, and Gilligan had radioactive spinach. And it's just, those are the things that just make that. It was just the goofiest. But as a little kid, as a 5th, 6th, 7th grader, you just absolutely loved it.
Well, it's a touchstone of pop culture. It's just it was just huge in our lives. It's not a question if you've seen every episode. It's like, how many times have you seen every single episode?
Yeah, it's just one of those things where, again, it's not great writing. It wasn't, it's not. Some of the other things on my list are deeper, serious, blah, blah, blah. But Gilligan's Island was a huge part of my youth, and it deserves to be number 10.
There you go, man.
So awesome. Number 9 on your list of the greatest television shows of all time.
All right, number 9, I've got a show called Firefly. Have you heard of that one?
I don't remember for sure.
The main character was played. His name was Mal. The actor was Nathan Fillion. I'm sure you're familiar with him. You would probably recognize him. But basically, this was on, I think it was on Fox, but it was a space western, quote unquote, series. It lasted for only 14 episodes, one season. It was 9 main characters, and just basically, just them kind of avoiding the law, I guess. It was a lot of space action and just really, really solid writing. Very, very humorous at times, just really well done. Joss Whedon was the main creative force behind that. It was just
he ended up being he's doing Marvel stuff. Is that am I right? Marvel stuff?
Yeah, he did the first Avengers movie.
Right, yeah.
and he was the main guy in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the TV series. So if you're familiar with his work, you know that he's
right.
That does a very good job. And then it only lasted for 14 episodes, but a few years later, they did make a movie, a spin-off or a sequel to wrap things up, a theatrical movie called Serenity. But it's just an amazing, amazing show. If you like Star Trek and stuff like that, it's definitely not like Star Trek. It's just irrelevant, irreverent, I should say.
Right. Yeah.
But it's a really great show.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out. Yeah, because I don't remember it, but that doesn't, depending if it's in that time frame you're talking about that it was put out, may have been when I wasn't
in 2002.
Yeah, I wasn't. I was in the process of getting myself ready to come here. Like back in school, in school and farming with my dad and stuff like that. My number 9 is back from when we were in the 3rd grade, and I only remember that because it sounds goofy because we weren't very old in the 3rd grade, but I was in love with someone named Lonnie Anderson.
Oh.
And I saw something on Twitter the other day. It was the episode where Andy Travis tells Dr. Johnny Fever that he can play whatever music he wants to play, and he can even say the word booger on the air. And when I was watching that, I was like, I think a good comedy, especially good television comedy, my favorites and the ones on my list are ensembles. They have multiple characters that have different personalities. And WKRP in Cincinnati is that. You had Mr. Carlson, you had Dr. Johnny Fever, you had Andy Travis, you had Herb, you had Les, you had Bailey, you had Venus Flight. I mean, it had all these different personalities. And then for me and you both actually being huge music fans, you throw that into it. It's at a radio station. I love that show. That show will always be one of my favorites. I've had a t-shirt in my queue to order to make my wife mad, for ordering another t-shirt that has all of the names I just mentioned on it. Again, like Gilligan's Island, not changing the world, but just an enjoyable, and it had kind of a short run too, right? It wasn't like it was on for.
I'm not sure how
it
long
wasn't.
that ran.
I don't think. Well, it wasn't Cheers. I know that it wasn't Cheers, Seinfeld, Friends, blah blah blah.
I'm not sure how many seasons.
Yeah,
but,
I would imagine less than 4, to be honest.
I'm not sure. I mean, I don't know if there's a DVD release of it or not. If they did, I think they probably couldn't get a lot of music rights.
Right. Yeah, I bet. Yeah, because that scene I'm talking about is, if you remember it, Dr.
Johnny
said
Fever?
Howard Hessman, Dr. Johnny Fever.
Yeah.
He breaks a record in half and puts the one rock and roll down because, I just love it. That was such a good show.
Now,
great characters.
Before your kids and other people get mad at you, I think you should probably say the name of the show. I don't believe you said the name of it.
WKRP in Cincinnati.
Okay.
So,
all right.
Love it. Love it. So number 8, we're already at 8.
All right. Number 8, Reservation Dogs. Have you heard of that show?
I don't think so.
I think it was on FX. I'm not sure. I get my shows from other ways, so I don't stream anything. This ran for 3 seasons from 2021 to 2023. So it just ended last year. Only 10 episodes a season, I think. But basically, this follows the lives of 4 indigenous teenagers, and it's set in a reservation town in Oklahoma. And it's the first American series to feature all indigenous writers and directors, along with an almost entirely indigenous North American cast and crew. And basically, the premise of the series: the 4 main characters are experiencing grief over the death of their friend Daniel, which took place a year before the events of the series. And it's just sort of their living their lives, their everyday lives, and how they process everything and just life in the reservation. And before I ever watched it, the first reviews I'd read of the show that were describing the first episode of it, they faked me out. I thought the tone was going to be very different than what ended up being. I thought it was going to be about like heists and capers, partially from the name Reservation Dogs. The movie Reservoir Dogs. It is a play on that, but it turned out not to be that kind of a show at all.
Right.
It's really about friendship and community and love, and it's just the most amazing, genuine, heartfelt series. It's incredible. It's often funny, sometimes heartbreaking, occasionally dark, but it's always real. But I love that real, heartfelt, genuine tone that it has. I might mention another show with that same sort of tone, but that's my number 8. I didn't know if you'd heard of it or.
Yeah, no, I haven't. And again, when you said it was more recent, it was a more recent show.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. In the phase of life that I'm in now, I watch very little television. So,
right.
Unless it's something. I mean, there are some things that I watch. There's some things on my list that are recent, but you can kind of tell. Coming up on my list, like what I have going on in my life when I'm watching these things or where I was at that phase in life. So no, but I will have to check that out.
Definitely.
I haven't.
If you look at any best of TV shows of like 2021, 2022, one of those lists back there, you're always going to see that like on every single list.
Yeah.
It's yeah. If I would recommend, I would definitely recommend that show to anybody. And maybe some of you listening out there have watched it and you're like, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Right. So, because my 10, 9, 8, and 7 are all from our youth. So my number 8 was created by one of my favorite movie directors of all time. Maybe my favorite director of all time. He's made one of my favorite movies of all time, Heat. He's, made the movie version of this television show. He's just the king. Michael Mann is in charge of a TV show called Miami Vice from when we were kids. I don't remember a TV show before that had a soundtrack that was released. You and I both love music. We talk music all the time. So they released an album of the songs he played. I was prepping yesterday, Friday actually, for the 1985 music podcast. That Jerry and I will do eventually. There's a song called Picture Book from the band Simply Red. I've got a big Simply Red thing I'm going to go into with that. But Miami Vice had so many popular songs. He used In the Air Tonight. He used Smuggler's Blues from Glenn Frey.
I think those guys are on there actually.
The cinematography was amazing. I'm big into cinematography, and he made a movie called Collateral with Tom Cruise and Jamie Foxx that I love. And the show Miami Vice at the time, people thought of it as the pastels and the way Don Johnson was dressed and Philip Michael Thomas were dressed. It was so much more than that. Like if you go back and watch those episodes, it was so far ahead of its time. I wish it was still on Netflix. It bums me out that I don't have access to it without paying for it. I know we're going to mention things that we wished we could watch or later on when we're done with this, but I really wish I could go back and watch those episodes because I know from the times that I have, it's way, way ahead of its time.
I would imagine that you could get the DVD sets like super cheap. Just get some cheap used DVDs from eBay or Amazon Marketplace.
I think it was a great show by a great director with good characters and great music.
Absolutely, it was so cinematic,
and it was exactly, way, way ahead of its time and the way that it did things. Number 7, we're already there.
All right, yeah. Lucky 7. Okay, another tie. This is only a 2-way tie. So we're making progress. And again, grouping like items together, as our favorite teacher, Mr. Zabrak, would say.
I wasn't paying attention, so I don't remember that.
Fair enough. Friday night videos and night tracks. Surely you remember Friday night videos. That was a huge, huge part of our...
Yeah. It completely changed my life.
Same here.
It made the VCR worth having.
So you've probably all heard of a little thing called MTV. I remember, we're probably on the same page here, Tony, but that debuted in 81. I think it was August 1st, 1981, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, you're right.
And of course, we lived in the country, and of course, we didn't get any cable at all. So I remember
neither of our parents had the money to buy a $1,500 satellite dish, which I'm not saying you or I are throwing $1,500 around in 2024, but at that time that was a lot of money.
Yeah,
I couldn't comprehend why Dad wouldn't get one, but it was a lot of money.
But I remember being very envious of. I'd always wanted to see music videos because it's like at that age especially, it's like I really want to watch those music videos. So, it debuted in I believe July of 1983, maybe July 29th, if not mistaken. But I started watching it like a month later in August of '83, and it just changed my life. As Tony said, it came on Friday nights, 11:30 p.m. Our time. And so I'd stay. It was hard to stay up, but I did, and it was amazing. And we'll talk about that much more in depth in our other podcasts. We'll really dive into that. And also, I would go to visit my dad in the summertime. So I spent 5 summers in a row with my dad. He had cable in his small town of Boonville, Arkansas, and just basic cable. So one of those basic cable stations was WTBS. They had a show called Night Tracks, which actually debuted in '83. I didn't discover it until the following summer, '84. As much as I love Friday Night Videos, holy smoke, Night Tracks was where it's at, because they would play videos all night long. It's basically 8 hours of Friday night and 8 hours on Saturday night. And Saturday night they would start out with an hour called Night Tracks Chartbusters. So they'd do like the top 10 of the week. I remember when Raspberry Beret debuted at number 1. I was like blown away. I'm like, that's cool. But that was my summertime for those last 3 summers, 84, 85, 86. I would spend Friday and Saturday nights up all night long watching Night Tracks. And it was amazing. And I will really delve into that in greater detail at our other podcast.
I haven't posted it yet. You and I were talking earlier. Our dear friend Chad was over a couple Sundays, 2 weeks ago today, and he mentioned Night Tracks. We were talking about the pod that we were doing. He mentioned that, and I didn't have access to cable in any way unless not many of my friends had it. But yeah, he talked about Night Tracks. But your Friday Night Videos, I mean, it did. My mom and dad, when they got a VCR, that's one of the things the VCR was used for. I recorded, I'd wake up Saturday morning when we were in high school and watch middle school, high school, and I'd watch whatever videos it had been. And if you go on YouTube and you and Google it or look it up, and I can hear the guy's voice, the guy that did the voiceover for it tonight,
Yep.
The new song from Def Leppard, I can hear that like it was yesterday. And it was such an important part of my youth. And living in the country and not have it, because music was such a big part of, it has been part of my life since I was 6. So,
and the music videos back then were so just
Yes,
awesome.
it was
awesome.
an event. It was an event, and it was an important part of you buying something or getting something. So, so my number 7, you mentioned in your when we were doing rapid fire, going through things. I don't know of the shows on my top 10 that have had more of an impact or that I watched and meant so much to me than what number 7, Happy Days. Happy Days, and you mentioned the Fonz. I have pictures of me I have a t-shirt that, when I was a little kid, says Fonzie for president. There's so many things that, I loved about that show. Again, ensemble characters, Ralph Mouth, Potsy, Joni, Chachi, Mr. and Mrs. Cunningham, clearly Richie and Fonzie.
Mr. C.
Yeah. I mean,
Fonzie was the most popular character of the 70s.
His office was the bathroom.
Yep.
He would hit the jukebox and it would play music.
He was the epitome of cool.
He gave the statement or the thing of jumping the shark.
Yeah.
He jumped over a bunch of buses with a motorcycle and crashed into the chicken thing from Arnold's. But I mean, it had good things on it too. And it spawned Laverne and Shirley and other, Robin Williams. We saw Robin Williams on it as Mork, I love that show. I love those characters. It was a huge, huge part of being a kid. Is it better than, again, it's not the greatest show, but I loved it. It was part of my youth.
Absolute comfort food.
Yeah, it is. I love that show and I love those characters, and it was a part of my youth. So
for sure.
Number 6.
All right. I have a feeling for some of these, we're gonna have some. I'm wondering how many of these are going to be the same. But anyway, my number 6 is Cheers, and so I think most people are familiar with that show. But if you've never seen it before,
there's something wrong with you.
Well, you know, maybe if you're not quite as old as we are.
Yeah, but my son Cole, like he binged that. Like I got him a T-shirt for Christmas 3 years ago because he just got on that on Netflix. Yeah, like he just went. I mean, because it's great. I'll let you go ahead, but I mean, yeah, I mean,
it's setting a bar
he's
at the end.
He's 23, and he's a huge fan. So,
no, it's just an amazing. It's extremely intelligent, intelligently written, very well written. It doesn't. It's just very, intelligent, sophisticated humor. The first 5 seasons, of course, featured Shelley Long as Diane, and those are the 5 seasons that I greatly prefer. I greatly prefer Diane over Rebecca, who I love Kirstie Alley, and I liked Rebecca okay, and then she took over. She filled the role of the main female character for the last 6 seasons, so it lasted 11 seasons in all. As I said, the first 5 seasons for me are just essential, and they're very solid and they hold up. And those are the seasons I rewatch over and over again. I remember liking it still after Diane left and when Rebecca came on. But it just sort of gradually, for me, it became less and less interesting. Maybe by season 8, for me personally, it fizzled out. And I didn't even watch the last few seasons at all. Of course, I watched the series finale, when Diane came back, and I thought it had a pretty decent series finale. But yeah, that show was just, I still quote it all the time. So very quotable.
I'll do the thing that I do on these normally. I won't talk about it because it's coming up. So I'll reserve my comment on Cheers.
I had a feeling
for later on in
Fair enough.
This. My number 6 is along the lines of Cheers in this way. The modern Cheers, in my opinion, would be The Office. My number 6 is The Office. I love The Office. The Office is, again, I've said this 3 times now. It's an ensemble. It has multiple different characters that play off of one another, just like Cheers that was your number 6. Characters that you love to death.
I assume you're talking about the American version?
Yeah, the American version. Dwight is one of the greatest characters of all time. Michael Scott is hilarious. Jim and Pam, like you love those characters. Ron and I obviously, watched through it together and love it so much, and my kids love it. It's such a funny ensemble show, and it's the thing that I love about movies or TV. It's not one character. It's not focusing on one of them. It's hilarious. It's a great show. I don't know if you've seen it. I don't know how it couldn't be in your top 10 because of how good it is. It's just, I will say, much like what you were just saying, and I'll get to my opinions of Cheers. I thought towards the end, it kind of dwindled when Steve Carell left, and they were filling with James Spader and even, the great Will Ferrell. I don't think it was as good as it kind of petered out at the end, which is disappointing. Maybe that's something to be said for just ending it when it's time to end it, when one of the major people decides to leave. But anyway, The Office is my number 6 because it's fantastic.
Well, I'm familiar with that show. This is going to sound really strange, but I've only seen like a few episodes, the first few episodes.
So I wasn't taking a shot at you when I said I don't know how it couldn't be.
Right. No, of course. But I'm one of the few people I think have actually never seen it. I've got weird gaps, I think, in my TV viewing vocabulary, so that's one of those weird gaps. But eventually I might go back and fill it in.
Well, though. I mean, again, it's like when you were mentioning some of the ones that I hadn't seen. I don't watch a lot of TV, and when I do, it's only a select amount of things, and that was one of the things that Ron and I were able to binge through Netflix or whatever.
Yeah, there's only a finite amount of time.
So here we are. We were into the top 5 now. So what's
Yay.
the 5th best television show according to Kevin Moon?
All right, so we have another 3-way tie, but again, they all go together really nicely. These are all, these were all originally on Fox, 3 animated shows. You probably know what I'm going to say: The Simpsons, Futurama, and King of the Hill. So those shows are all essential. I do want to qualify some of these somewhat. Of course, The Simpsons. What can anyone say about The Simpsons?
Say anything about The Simpsons.
I will say that I love the first 10 seasons of The Simpsons, and at some point after that, it sort of, for me, kind of gradually, became less and less interesting to me. So I kind of go with the first 10 seasons. I think it was some episodes in the 11th season where I just kind of started to drift away from it. But those first 10 seasons, holy cow, just so funny and intelligent. It's insane. Futurama, awesome. It's been canceled and resurrected twice. In fact, the 3rd incarnation is currently airing now, actually. And I've seen every single episode except for the recent episodes that have been airing. So I need to catch up on that very soon. Finally, King of the Hill. Oh my gosh, it just kept getting better and better and better.
So I don't want to sound dumb, but I'm good at it. So
come on now.
King of the Hill, would that have come from Beavis and Butthead in any way? Is it Mike Judge? Is Mike Judge?
Mike Judge is definitely the creator of that. Did it
come from, I knew he was, but did you?
No, and here's why you're saying that. Because there is a character on Beavis and Butthead, a recurring character called Mr. Anderson, I think.
Similar to
Hank Hill.
Right.
So he didn't look the same, but he had the same voice. I think his name is Mr. Anderson.
Because Mike Judge is a genius, and Beavis and Butthead is sorely underrated.
It
for
really
its
is. Yeah, it was commentary, but Mike Judge is just an excellent. If you pardon the pun, a judge of the human character. If you've ever seen Office Space, that kind of...
that's a great movie that I know I'm supposed to have watched it, and I never have.
Oh, well...
I've never seen it.
You know what you need to put on the top of your to-watch list, then, Office Space.
I'm serious. I know that it's one of those that I've never seen, that I've been told by... And someone's watching this and like, are you serious? You haven't seen Office Space?
That's going in your on-deck circle, buddy.
Yeah.
But it's extremely intelligently written, but he's a... very good observational humorist, but King of the Hill is it's far more realistic than The Simpsons and Futurama by a million miles. In fact, King of the Hill could almost be, not quite, but like a real life show, but it's obviously funny or animated. But it's really has a sense of realism to it. It's basically just every episode just like a real life situation.
Yeah.
But it's just that gentle observational humor that Mike Judge is so incredibly adept at, and it lasted for I think 13 seasons, and instead of fizzling out, it just kept getting better and better and better. I just thought it, and the last few seasons had Tom Petty in it. He was my favorite character. He played Lucky. He played Luann's boyfriend. I didn't even say what the show is about. If you've never seen it, it's basically a guy named Hank Hill and his wife Peggy and their son Bobby. He ain't right, and it's just basically his life in Texas. So it's like a slice of life show.
Yeah, I don't have any of those 3 on my list. Here's what I would say about them. I remember when The Simpsons, obviously, clearly, if you don't know what The Simpsons are, you're not a lot. I don't know what you're doing. But I watched it some. I remember when it came out, I probably still have the Rolling Stone magazine somewhere in my house that has Bart on the cover. It's a great show. I was never a huge fan, but I know its greatness. My son Cole loved Futurama. Multiple Christmases were
it's set in
DVD
the future
box set. Like he loved that show. And then King of the Hill, I love Beavis and Butthead. I just said that. I remember seeing it for the first time on MTV because that's where we found it, because it was on whatever show. It was a late Liquid Television, I think.
Oh, did it spin off from that? Or, okay.
That's where it came from. That's the first time you ever saw Beavis and Butthead was on something called Liquid Television. I'm just sure of it. So
I'm definitely familiar with Liquid Television.
Yeah.
What was I going to say? For me, a little bit of Beavis and Butthead goes a long way, so I can watch it in small doses. But King of the Hill, for me, is his magnum opus. I think that's his masterwork.
I think
Mike Judge's masterwork.
I think the thing about Beavis and Butthead was, though, they would pick videos that you knew, and they would make fun of it. Like there's a thing that's
the best part.
There's a thing that I say all the time to people, and if they listen to this, they'll know what I'm talking about. The episode where they say, and then this guy is what Butthead says, and I say that all the time, like. And then there's this guy. So, yeah, no, good stuff. Mike Judge is very, very, very talented, obviously.
Watch Office Space.
Number 5 for me is a show from when we moved to Mason City, and it will pop up in my Facebook memories on a regular basis about how I have to hurry home to watch the show House. The show House, an eccentric, for a lack of a better term, doctor who can diagnose crazy things that nobody else can figure out. The actor is Hugh Laurie,
Hugh Laurie.
Yeah, Hugh Laurie.
Yeah.
He's great in it. The other characters, Omar Epps, or the other actors, great. I love that show. That show was great. Rhonda and I could not wait to watch it when it got onto Netflix. We would binge through it on Netflix. We've watched it on Amazon Prime. You say really fifth best in this way. We couldn't miss it. It was, oh crap, I got to hurry home and watch or we were recording it when we got DirecTV, and it was a automatic record. You watched it, you had to watch it because it was just his way of treating people. And we love that show. The show is a great, well acted, well cast, and you never knew what medical ailment was going to come up. It was like ER on crack, I guess, in a different way. And ER was great. I have good memories of watching that and had great characters in it. But the show House was fantastic.
I actually never saw that show. I know I'm familiar with it. I'm familiar with Hugh Laurie, and I knew the basic premise of the show, but I've never seen a single episode of that show.
I loved it. I absolutely loved it.
I know he's an eccentric crank, I guess, right?
Yeah, Sort of and combative to his bosses.
His stock and trade.
Yeah, always. Yeah. Really, really, really good show. If you haven't watched it, give it a shot. All right, we're inside now, number 5 to number 4 for you.
Getting into the heavy hitters here. Another two-way tie. Saturday Night Live, a.k.a. SNL, and Kids in the Hall. And so, of course, I'm sure you're all familiar with SNL. Kids in the Hall was sort of like a Canadian version of that. Kids in the Hall was really far more similar to Monty Python. Basically, they're a troupe of 5 guys, and they play all the parts, including all the female parts as well. But basically, 2 quintessential sketch comedy shows, both produced by the same guy, Lorne Michaels. And I'm obsessed with both of these shows. They're extremely quotable and memorable. I mean, I think we're
that goes without saying.
We're always quoting, SNL stuff. Mm-hmm. Kids in the Hall is very quotable as well. If you,
I didn't watch it as much. I mean, we had Comedy Central when we lived in Macomb, and I know it was on.
That's more of a cult favorite.
Yeah, and it wasn't. I don't know if it was ever that I watched it and didn't like it. I mean,
SNL's more mainstream.
Dave Foley, right?
Yeah.
Is it Dave Foley?
Oh, what's that?
Dave, who's the guy that was in News Radio.
Oh yeah, Dave Foley was in Kids in the Hall.
Yeah. I love Dave Foley. But
yeah,
it wasn't that I didn't watch it because I didn't like it or I didn't. I just never added it to the list of things to keep an eye on. But yeah, I know a lot about it. So
yeah, I mean, I fell in love with. I think I saw like my introduction to it was like a best of Kids in the Hall special from HBO, I think. and I just fell in love with it. It's so quirky, and just some of the recurring characters are just very nutty, and it's not for everyone. It just sort of speaks to me, I guess. It's just really offbeat and kind of crazy. And of course, SNL has gone through so many iterations. That could be its own podcast, I think.
Well, it's going to be.
I think probably you and I might be doing that. I'm an SNL nut. I literally have every single episode of Saturday Night Live downloaded. There still have so many I haven't seen yet, but I'm methodically going through and watching them all. I'm even trying to collect all of these sketches that were never rerun. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but there are many instances where certain sketches, like after they ran the very first time, they would be cut out for the rerun episodes, and they'd never be seen again.
They did that, yeah.
Oh, they did. I hadn't either until I really did a deep dive and went down the rabbit hole. But that happened a lot. So there are some sketches that aired.
Were they inappropriate, or were they offensive, or
just a variety of reasons?
I'm not going to mention another thing coming up on my list, but I know that they,
in some cases, yeah,
would put another sketch comedy show that I love. They would have to edit out some things that when they offended someone, or they may have pushed the limit.
Well, that's part of it, I guess. But basically, some of these sketches were aired once. You saw it live, and if you didn't see it live, you never saw it again.
Right.
So, I'm trying to collect all of those. Like, I'm trying to find, people who have taped them and uploaded them, and so I've been successful in some of them. So I have some first run episodes, like where people would have taped the very first the live airing of it. Like one example, again, there's no reason for this to be cut, but oh gosh, it was a Dieter Goes to Space or something like that. It was like a Christmas sketch. It was like a black and white German expressionist film.
Mike Myers.
Mike Myers, yeah. So it was one of the Dieter things, but I think it was called Dieter Goes to Space. But there's nothing wrong with it. I don't know why it just never was. It was cut out from subsequent airings, but it aired exactly one time.
Right.
And that was that. But I have the original episode of that, for example. So I'm trying to make even though I quote unquote have every single episode of Saturday Night Live, I need to find like the first run episodes to make it truly complete. So that might be nearly impossible.
I think because what you were just saying, we've talked about doing an SNL episode, so I won't go into like my history with SNL or whatever, other than to say it's not on my list. It's on my special mention list because of I don't watch it at all anymore. Like, I haven't watched it in years. I'm not an elitist. I don't expect them to be Will Ferrell, Phil Hartman, Dana Carvey, those guys. I don't find it as funny. The times I've watched it within the last 15 years, it's not even been close to what I remember when you and I were kids, and we would ruin Sunday school class, Mike Ulmer's Sunday school class. We would get there and talk church lady and this and that. There are characters that I love. There are actors that are on there. Like Kate McKinnon is hilarious. Christine Wiig. I know there's other people. I haven't watched it for so long, but boy, it was such a part of our youth.
High school especially. Absolutely.
I had recorded a best of that Mike and Billy and I would watch over and over and over again. I don't ever think of, whenever I see that commercial, it's been on TV recently with Martin Short and Steve Martin. And I don't see Martin Short and not think about Jackie Rogers Jr. and the $100,000 jackpot wad.
You just referenced my favorite sketch of all time.
Yeah, I mean, Billy and I we would laugh about that all the time. So SNL has a special place in my heart. It has dropped off in my opinion. But anyway, yeah, no, such a huge part of our youth. And when you say quoted, unbelievably quoted.
I will say
and over quoted.
I wasn't sure how current you were with it. I will say that I've for the last several years I've kept current with every single episode. So
yeah,
at least since season 40, there have been a few periods of time where I did kind of drop off and not watch SNL as much. There's like a few seasons here and there where I haven't watched all of the episodes. So I'm trying to play catch up now. But definitely in the last 9 seasons, I've seen every single episode. I always watch it the next day.
Everything that I've seen probably would come from YouTube. Like I say, Kate McKinnon, when she does the alien abduction scenes, that's come from YouTube. It's not been watched or recorded. So I mean,
it's made for YouTube basically.
Its impact on my life
for sure.
It was huge. It's just doesn't really affect it so much now. My number 4 is something I came to a little bit late, and I fell in love with it. It was a Sunday night thing. It aired on Sunday night. It's one of the shows that would turn my stomach in this way, like not make me sick, but like you got so attached to the main character, like when he was going through stuff. I don't know. We just got into it. We love that show so much. Kiefer Sutherland is great. Kiefer Sutherland has such a huge part of our Lost Boys and Stand By Me from movies when we were kids. But the show 24, to come up with a show that the season is one day and each episode is an hour within that 24-hour period of time. That show was so good. I was so heartbroken when it went off. They could have kept regurgitating the same premise over and over. I know the reviews that it got as it went on, like you're basically doing the same thing over again. I didn't care. I loved it. The characters were great. He was an amazing character. How he saved the day every time in some crazy way. You know, the James Bond lover in me, it was very similar to that. I always tell the story about it was on Netflix back when Netflix was, you got a DVD in the mail, and I would get those and you would watch them. Well, then when you could stream it, we were on spring break one year, whatever year it was. And, Rhonda came home for lunch and she's like, well, what have you got done today? And, I had done nothing but sit here and binge 24. Just, you're like, after this episode, I'm going to stop and get something done. And it would hang, the cliffhanger ending, you're like, oh crap, I got to watch another one. And I mean, you had spent literally 5.5 hours doing nothing but watching it. It's one of the ultimate binge watching. You can't stop watching it. It's 1 a.m. What are you doing? Because I just love it. I love that show. Fantastic. 24 is my number 4. And my top 4, other than number 1, interchangeable. Could almost be interchangeable. It's so good. So good.
I've actually never seen 24. I'm familiar with it, of course, but
I love it. I love it. So
were there like entire episodes where they're just sleeping then? Because, you got to sleep some of it.
Nope. Jack Bauer doesn't sleep.
Okay.
Kevin. Okay. You can't save the world when you're asleep. All right.
Just do like a little bump now and again or something. All right.
Nope.
Fair enough.
Nope.
All right.
Okay. Number 3. My top 3 are pretty darn good. I'm interested to see what you've got in your top 3.
Conversely, my top 3 are horrible. I saved the worst 3 for last.
Oh, that's weird.
Do it just a little bit differently. No, my number 3, another 2-way tie. This is the last one, the last of the ties. Star Trek and Star Trek: The Next Generation. So I cannot pick one over the other. I absolutely cannot pick one over the other. I love them both.
Anthony
equally.
Wherley would call that cheating, by the way.
Why is that?
You got to pick.
I'm afraid not.
Okay, well, you're my guest, so go ahead.
Like in this Weird Al song, White and Nerdy, it's like the only question I ever thought was hard is, do I like Kirk or do I like Picard? So anyway, both are a huge part of an influence on popular culture and big part of my life. And as I said, I love both series equally. I mean, this is a huge part of my life in high school, especially later high school. I would see every single episode of Star Trek at my friend Lance's house. Our TV reception was not good. This was my senior year of high school when I was just moved to Adair. Couldn't get any TV at all. So it was airing on one of the independent stations, maybe channel 43 or 55. It came on every night, 10 p.m. And so I would drive to Lance's house from Adair, and I would watch it with his parents, even when he wasn't there. Sometimes he worked really late. He was working Eagles, but I would watch it every episode of Star Trek, the original series. And also Lance and I both loved Star Trek The Next Generation, which debuted my junior year of high school. And I loved it from the get-go. But those are two shows. I don't think they need any introduction, but everyone's familiar with Star Trek.
Yeah, I was never a big Star Trek person. It doesn't mean that I didn't like it. I just didn't watch it much. I mean, I obviously you'd have to, if you were our age, you'd have to be under a rock to not know those shows.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're obviously sci-fi, famous people, famous characters, well loved.
Spawned lots of great movies.
Yes, and the more recent movies were fantastic. The movies when we were kids were good too. I really liked the ones they've made in the 2000s. They've been really, really good.
Oh, the next gen movies?
Yeah, the ones with what is it, Chris Pine as
you're talking about the reboot.
Yeah, I really those have been good.
The Kelvin timeline.
In my opinion, those have been done well.
The 2009 movie especially, I thought was really well
very,
done.
Very, very good, in my opinion.
I like Chris Pine a lot, too.
Yeah, and the person who plays Spock is good, and it's good. William Shatner, Leonard Nimoy. I can still remember watching the movie The Wrath of Khan at the Bailey household on
the movie's
VHS.
epic. It holds up to this day because of all it has...
Jerry will not agree with you, but I agree with you on that.
Fair enough. It's got great themes to it. It's got the theme of revenge, the theme of aging, the thought of
and it's got Ricardo Montalban.
The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the one, or the few of the one. So it's a lot of themes.
Right. My number 3 you've already mentioned, and it was really hard for me not to have this number 2 because my number 1 is a lock and it's not close. Like there was no way my number 1 wouldn't be my number 1.
Gotcha.
But number 3 is Cheers. And it's funny because you and I 100% disagree from what you said. I love Rebecca. I was not a Shelley Long fan. I found her character to be she annoyed me. I like Shelley Long. I love Shelley Long in a movie called Night Shift.
Oh yeah,
with Michael Keaton and Henry Winkler. Yeah, I love her in that, and I like her in Cheers.
Yep.
And those were the Coach days too. But I'm a Woody guy. I'm a Rebecca. I love Rebecca. I love Kirstie Alley. I was in love with Kirstie Alley. Those episodes, she cracks my ass up. I love her to death. And again, I love the show in its beginning to end. I'm not saying that you're wrong. I'm saying I loved the Rebecca character. How the Robin Colcord stuff and all that. I just did. I loved her character more than I loved the Sam and Diane dynamic of it. Woody Harrelson is so funny, and Norm and Cliff and Frasier. I'm running with scissors. I'm just that show.
That was Frasier, right?
Again,
that did that.
Yeah, Frasier. Because it was when he thought Lilith wanted a bad boy.
Yep.
And it is so good. And you go back, and when I mentioned that Cole was binge watching it on his iPad through Netflix, and it got me back to watching it some when he was in high school. It's so good. It's so good.
It's just a brilliant. I just love it. Good. It's just a brilliant show.
It's and again, the fact that it's number 3 on my list tells you how much I love 1 and 2, because it is such an amazing and great show.
It could have been higher on my list too. Some of these could on a different day they could be somewhat interchangeable.
Yeah, well,
Cheers could be higher.
I think this is, and when we get into our next episode, I'll say that. But.
And also, you'll be very happy to know that I literally just ordered and received in the mail the season 7 DVD box set of Cheers, and my brother and I are going to start rewatching it here tomorrow.
I loved Rebecca. I thought that was a great she was needy and just different. It's different than Diane, and it doesn't make Diane bad, or I like that character better. So number 2, I'm interested. I have no idea what you're going to say in 1 and 2.
See, I have a really good idea of what your number 1's going to be. And
Okay.
so if and when you say it, I'll be like, I was right. My number 2 is Babylon 5, which you might think is a little
I know
surprising.
I know it. I don't.
Yeah.
I've never watched it, but I know what it is.
Right. You might be surprised that I put it above Star Trek.
Yes.
But Babylon 5 is an extraordinary show. It was ahead of its time in that it had a pre-planned 5-year story arc and was serialized, which was very uncommon at that time. It ran from 93 to 98. The pilot was shown in 93, and then a year later, season 1 started in 94, and they ran 5 seasons to 98. But nowadays, so many things are serialized. I mean, that's basically almost the default of all shows today. But back then, it was unheard of. Everything is episodic. TV executives wanted you to be able to watch an episode, and just a single episode, and you, at any time, just to drop in the middle of a season or something and not have to worry about catching up.
Yeah.
So that was one of the very first shows to do that, unless you count soap operas, but I'm not. What really made this show special was the incredible cast of characters, and it was extremely well written with excellent actors bringing them to life. It's just excellent. I can just watch the whole thing over and over again, and it really holds up. In terms of story, I know people sort of unfairly criticize, I think, the special effects at the time, which are groundbreaking. Nowadays, people are a little nitpicky about their special effects, but the stories absolutely hold up, and in many ways, it was very prescient. It's if you watch it today, you might kind of get a chill at some of the things, like, oh my gosh, this guy knew what he was talking about.
Yeah.
It was very very political. It was different from the regular Star Trek series of the time, at least the first 2 series, in that it wasn't set in a starship, but on a station, a stationary station. But it had a lot of political intrigue. It had like ambassadors, so if you're just hearing that description of it, you might think, well, that's not terribly exciting. But I assure you, it was basically had like at least part of it had like a Lord of the Rings kind of vibe. So that if that intrigues you, then you should check it out.
Yeah, because I think one of the things that you would say about it, like, you're more of a sci-fi fan probably than what I am. But if you say that's in the top 2, then if you're listening to this and you're a sci-fi fan and you haven't watched it, then that's the whole point of doing this podcast in some ways, is like, hey, we're just trying to turn you on to something that maybe you haven't been turned on to. So
that's amazing. And as I said, I've been a huge Star Trek fan for years, but I think truly my heart belongs to Babylon 5.
Again, to say that you would pick that in front of that, yes.
Yep.
having known you my whole life, yes.
I thought that would surprise you.
Yes. My number 2 is from, we were talking earlier of our love of Apple, and thankfully Apple came out with something called Apple TV and started making their own things. And Rhonda and I came across a show called Ted Lasso that Apple made. And I have some very good friends. Our dear friend Jerry loves Ted Lasso as well. Ted is college football coach that gets brought to England to coach soccer. And the owner of the soccer team is recently divorced from her husband, and she's trying to tank the team and make them not be successful. So what better way to bring some guy from the middle of Kansas to Britain who knows nothing about football, soccer, football. And it is an unbelievable 3 seasons, only 3 seasons. It is so good. The coach in me, multiple times, not in tears, but choked up. I've told a very good friend of mine who's a coach that he needs to watch it. It's a life thing. There are so many life things in it. It is Jason Sudeikis, who's hilarious, former SNL guy. So many amazing characters, ensemble. I've said again on repeat throughout this whole pod. I've told multiple people that I know that it's worth getting worth getting Apple TV for the amount of time it takes you to binge it, because it's such good life stuff. Yeah, I love it. It's to think that, I guess the thing to say is, for you to jump Cheers, you have to be good. Because when you brought this idea to me, Cheers won automatically, is what I would have said.
Right.
I mean, without thinking, without writing down, whatever, I say Cheers.
Yep.
And to think Ted Lasso jumped Cheers with only 3 seasons, no Diane Rebecca that we just talked about, no Coach Woody, no whatever. That's how good Ted Lasso is. Ted Lasso is right there. So,
well, I love Ted Lasso. So I think it's a great, great show. I have not seen season 3 yet. The first 2 seasons were so solid, but season 3 is definitely on my to-watch list. But I just want to say that you surprised the crap out of me, because I was so sure that was going to be your number one. I was like all smug, like, I don't know what your number one's going to be.
Yeah, so now you know.
Now I don't know.
Right,
I mean, maybe it's Guiding Light. Who the heck knows? Tune in to find out.
Are you reading my paper?
I've ate some radioactive carrots.
Okay. So now, before we go to number 1, we're going to jump back to the 5 that just missed. What 5 did not make it? What are the 5 that you're like, wrestling, tug of war, how in the heck am I not putting these on there?
Well,
and
again,
I know you said you had more than 5, which
I do, because I didn't
mean,
know we were limiting ourselves to 5, and that's my mistake.
It is my podcast, but because you're my friend, I'm letting you pick more than 5.
Well, if I okay, and as I said, if I'd known it was 5, but
you go right ahead.
So I'll just rapid fire these, but these are
just a tiny discussion. I mean, you can say something about it.
Oh, okay.
Or if it doesn't need it, go ahead.
But I'll just rapid fire these, and then if you want to say any comments about them, then
okay,
that's
and then
we'll
do the same in reverse.
Okay, and so these are what I would call my honorable mentions, and also the just missed list. But I've got Parks and Recreation, Friends, The Expanse, The Orville, Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Star Trek Voyager, Star Trek Prodigy. Star Trek Prodigy in particular is amazing. It's a still airing show. It's ostensibly a kid's show, but it's really more accurately an all-ages show, but it's just absolutely check that one out. Night Flight, remember that show on the USA Network?
It sounds familiar.
It was a bunch of like short films and music videos. It was just like a catch-all kind of thing. The Avengers, a British show from the 60s. Diana Rigg. And
right.
Patrick McNee.
Diana Rigg ended up being the wife of James Bond in Her Majesty's
Secret Service, yeah. And they had a really long and happy life together.
Actually, no. She got shot in the head.
Why'd you ruin it for me? It's Your Move.
Spoiler.
Do you remember that show, It's Your Move?
Yeah.
With
what was her name? I don't care about the kid. What was her name?
You didn't care about Jason Bateman?
No, I don't.
Karen Kay was the mom.
Yeah, Karen Kay.
My tutor. My tutor.
Yeah. That's why I care about. That's why I care about Karen.
Well, there you go. But it was produced, I think, by the same guys that did Married with Children. So David Garrison, I think, played Jason Bateman. I don't know his character's name. His nemesis. Yeah. And so and then. That was just a really great show. Lasted one season.
No offense, Jason Bateman, but Karen Kay. Yeah.
Fair enough. Here's a show that none of you guys have ever heard of. This is called Image Union.
I love that show.
It was basically a short film show that ran on the PBS Chicago station WTTW. And so that's a great show. It's just a film show. Undeclared, if you've heard of that one.
Mm-mm.
That was on Fox for one season, 2001, 2002. For All Mankind, it's ongoing. It started in 2019. It's basically an alternate version of what would have happened. Basically, the premise of that one is, what if the Soviets had landed on the moon first? And so it's like an alternate history. So each season tackles a different, like a decade, and it's moving forward in time, and they're up to like the 2000s, I think. But it's an amazing show. Moving really quickly, Ted Lasso, Newhart, I think you mentioned that one. Flight of the Conchords, Twilight Zone, the second series from the 80s, if you remember that one. Batman, the animated series from the early 90s. And finally, Late Night with David Letterman, the NBC original.
All right. So the only one of those that I have a whole lot, well, two things. Letterman's the king, beyond Johnny Carson. And Parks and Rec, I think you mentioned that, right? I wish I would have watched that more. I'm sorry that it's off Netflix because I can't go back and watch it. I think my kids have watched it, yeah. 5 for me on my just missed list, Batman 66. My dad graduated from high school in 66. It's funny to think that, age-wise where that was. Adam West, the king, run from the bus to get in there to watch Pow, Zan, the Joker, the Penguin, Cesar Romero. Number 4, your boy Jason Bateman in a show called Silver Spoons.
Oh, yeah.
With Rick Schroeder riding a train to the family room. Number 3, I don't know if All in the Family, you could talk forever about All in the Family and what All in the Family kind of the things that it tried to talk about. And
that was hugely influential.
Yeah, such an influential show. Archie Bunker, one of the greatest, maybe not, if not the greatest television character of all time, just because of the level of things that they talked about. Number 2, HBO has had 4 seasons of True Detective. The first one is absolute, as the kids would say, fire. It's not even close. If you've never watched it, Matthew McConaughey is unbelievable in it, as is Woody Harrelson. It's so good. Jerry, Chad, Joe, and I've talked about it multiple times.
I'm not familiar with that show.
Yeah, that first season of it is unbelievable. Matthew McConaughey just kills it. And then number 1 in my just missed list is a show called News Radio that I love.
Okay.
I love News Radio. I love Joe Rogan was great in it. Andy Dick is great in it. Dave Foley is great in it.
Yeah.
It's not Laura Linney. I can't think of her name. She was Jim Carrey's wife in Liar Liar.
I don't know.
Yeah, she's so good. Gosh darn it.
I'm really not familiar with that show too much.
But Phil Hartman's in it. Again, Phil Hartman is the king. So many things that he would have given us if his wife didn't kill him.
Oh,
so
boy.
His ex-wife didn't kill him because he was maybe the greatest.
This podcast is getting dark.
Maybe the greatest SNL person of our time. And I'm not exaggerating.
You wouldn't be wrong. He's the glue, man.
I love Phil Hartman. Okay, so that brings us to number 1.
Number 1.
So what is, in Kevin Moon's opinion, the greatest television show of all time?
All right. And then
I have no idea what you're going to say. Actually.
Okay. I didn't know if you'd be able to guess it or not, but my number 1 TV show of all time, and it's not even close, Freaks and Geeks. Absolute.
Okay. I remember it. I've never watched it.
Oh my gosh, this is the one I'd recommend over anything in the whole world. It ran for only 1 season, 18 episodes, I think, from 99 to 2000. The show is set from 1980 to 81. Has an amazing cast of characters and actors. All were unknown back then, but went on to become very well known. So if you go back and watch this today, you'll be surprised at how many famous people are in that show. They weren't famous then, but they're just amazing. Like Seth Rogen, I think, is super famous.
Yeah.
Names are escaping me now. Darn it. Well, James Franco, Linda Cardellini, Martin Starr. Darn it. Who's the guy in How I Met Your Mother? Shoot.
I know who you're talking about.
It'll pop in my brain later, and I'll just yell it out randomly.
I've seen it. I would help you out if I'd seen it, but I've never watched it. I definitely know what you're talking about, but I've never watched it.
Yep, so. It's Jason something. Darn it.
Jason. No. He was in the movie with Russell.
Forgetting
Brand
Sarah Marshall and all that. It'll pop in my head, and I'll kick myself later. But the tone,
someone's listening to this right now going, duh, it's such and such.
And that someone is future me. The tone, the stories, the writing and acting is warm and genuine and heartfelt. It's so real. Like you watch every episode and it's just, man. And if it really helps if you're, I mean, I think anyone of any age can appreciate it, but especially, you know, if you were around back then, it really hits home, you know, especially like you see some of the cultural touchstones, like the episode where Sam gets an Atari. So that was pretty amazing. It's just, I think it's the most perfect series ever. It's incredible.
Yeah, I haven't seen it, and then I sit here and I think, how in the world did we not mention, since it's based in 80s, how in the world did Stranger Things not get mentioned or put on my list? Have you ever watched Stranger Things?
Yeah,
Stranger
for
Things,
sure.
how did I not bring that up? It's not on my list, and that's dumb. But yeah, so anyway, going off the 80s thing, I need to watch that, because if it does, obviously centered in the 80s, it's fun nostalgia.
Jason Segel.
Told
you I'd remember it.
Right. My number one is the number one greatest television show of all time. And again, like I said, it's not close. Our dear friend Jerry told me a number of years ago at a guy's weekend at Kevin Weaver's house in Pekin that I needed to start watching a show called Game of Thrones. And I never did. He showed me the first episode, and it was pretty intense, actually. And I don't know. I bought the first DVD set, actually the day my father passed away, and brought it home, and didn't watch it for a while after that, and then started watching it through when we were getting HBO for free for a while, and unbelievable. Those of us who love Game of Thrones know that, like, the characters, how they don't care who it is. One of the main characters that you think is going to be involved in the show forever is killed at the end of the first season. Like, I mean, it's just, it throws you curveballs more than any show I've ever watched. On the desk in front of me is my favorite character, Tyrion, played by Peter Dinklage. Ron and I were watching it last night, and we were sitting there just cannot explain how much I love Game of Thrones.
I love the Dink.
And I never in a million years would have thought my wife would like a show that had that much profanity, that much gratuitous sex, that much gratuitous violence, dragons. I'm not joking. When I showed it to her the first time, and when it starts out, it automatically shows you like something that is she would not be interested in it. And she was the person, we were laughing last night, she would be the person at 12:30, 12:45 at night at the end of an episode saying, on a weeknight, do you want to watch one more? I'm like, we got to get up and go to work in the morning. Like, for her to watch this show.
You guys are so bad.
Tells you how crazy, like how it sucks you in and you have to watch it. And it's awful that they ruined it. The last season but it wasn't anywhere near as good as we got screwed in the ending of it. But there are 4 or 5 episodes that you just sit there and you're like, are you kidding me? I remember when I didn't watch it and I only knew of it, and I would be on Twitter in that room behind where you're sitting right now. And it was like a sporting event. People are tweeting about it in real time. In one of the episodes called The Red Wedding, people are tweeting, like, my feed is just, it's like when Osama bin Laden got killed. It was every single tweet is about it. Every single tweet was about The Red Wedding. It is unbelievable. My friend Caleb, the young, you and I've talked about him. He just graduated from high school. He's at Western right now. We were talking yesterday about Friday about doing the next pod. We're going to do a pod on the best episodes. We're going to do a pod on the best characters. It's that good. Game of Thrones is something else. And if you've not seen it, unless you're easily, if you don't like cuss words, you don't like certain cuss words, you don't like gratuitous, like what I said, then it's not for you. But if you've never watched it and those things don't bother you, unbelievable. Unbelievable. It's not close. None of these other shows on this piece of paper touch that.
Yeah, I think I heard you talking about it on one of your podcasts. And
yeah, Noah and I. Noah, played for me the year we won the state championship, was one of my students.
Yeah.
He's read the books 3 times. Gage is reading them right now. Gage is tearing through them.
Well,
My child,
he must like them.
Yeah, my son, who's a voracious reader, and Noah. So good, so good.
Right. I've actually never seen it.
Yeah, I'd be interested. I would be interested to see what you thought of it.
Oh gosh.
I would be interested to see what you thought of it, because it's something else. So that's a good pod. I do have something. I got a special mentions. I let you go over a little bit on your just missed. Let me throw these out to you.
Okay.
Do you have anything else that you haven't mentioned? I'm gonna hit on 6 things super fast.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm. Let me know if you want me to do these now or after. But I just have a list
go
of.
First.
Well, these are just a list of shows that are on my on deck circle that I still want to watch. And you might have seen some of these.
About that. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that okay?
Yeah, because the things I think of are like The Sopranos. I've never watched that. Jerry said Deadwood is good. There are some things on. There are things Eastbound and Down. There are things on HBO that I've never seen that I would. But what are those things that you would like to see?
So these are on my on deck circle. A lot of these I already have downloaded and are ready to watch. In fact, some of these I've had for a few years. I just never found the time. But I want to see Dollhouse, Orphan Black, Farscape, Kings, The Comeback, Ugly Americans, Jericho, Jeremiah, Watchmen, the original Twilight Zone. I've only seen a few episodes of that, but I think that's my next one I'm going to watch. Schitt's Creek, Abbott Elementary, The Bear, Man-Seeking Woman, the 4th and 5th seasons of Arrested Development. I've only seen the first 3 seasons on Fox, but I never saw the later seasons. The 3rd season of Ted Lasso, haven't watched that yet. Barry, the Bob Newhart Show, and then just an uncountable number of 1970s shows. I think 70 shows in particular are just really amazing.
Right.
There's so many good shows from the 70s.
Yeah.
And so I would love to just catch up on all of those.
The funny thing is leading into my special mentions goes to the 70s and 80s. We never knew how great Johnny Carson was. Like I remember being a kid and my parents watching Johnny Carson right before they kicked my butt to bed. And he would make you laugh and you didn't realize how funny he was, how talented he was at doing that. I'm not going to say anything about the guys that do late night TV now, but they're not that. I'll say that. Johnny Carson was something else.
You're right.
Which leads you then to the king, Dave Letterman.
Yeah.
Jason and I would watch Dave Letterman highlight, like year-end highlights, when he would put those things together and just die laughing when he would go through the drive-through or he was working the drive-through or whatever. Letterman was on a totally different level than anybody else when we were kids. How about Carol Burnett?
Oh, yeah.
The Carol Burnett show with Tim Conway and Harvey Korman. Are you kidding me? Like, seriously, she was Vicki Lawrence. It's not on the rest of my list only because those people that I just named are on an entirely different level and they were hilarious and they would crack each other up. It was like SNL in that way that they could get each other going. And,
I watched a lot of that when I was a
Conway
kid.
was the king of getting Harvey Korman. Like they couldn't hold it together. So good. In Living Color.
Oh my gosh.
In Living Color.
There you go.
There was a time period where In Living Color
early 90s
was better than
yes.
SNL.
For a short time, it was more popular and relevant.
You had Tommy Davidson, you had Jamie Foxx, you had Jim Carrey. So good. They were pushing the envelope. They were putting stuff on there that they could not get away with today. And it was hilarious.
That and Arsenio Hall was a good time on Fox.
They were doing things. We talked about SNL and we'll do a pod about it. The last one I want to mention before we cut this off at 1 hour and 32 minutes.
Good Lord.
Is Mystery Science Theater 3000.
I remember watching that at some friend's house.
Yes. That was when we found that, when Rhonda had an apartment in Macomb that we used to go to, you as well. Those guys were doing something that it's different level and it was so funny.
Yeah.
And you had to be smart and you had to know stuff and you're smart and know stuff. I know stuff. I'm not smart, but we sat there in a room full of people with like maybe 5 of us. And if one of us didn't get it, or if 4 of us didn't get it, someone did and could explain to us why it was so funny. And we were in our early 20s, and those are really good memories. And so your topic, best TV shows ever. That's a good discussion. We're all over the map.
Awesome.
There's people that are obviously watching this and or listening to this. I mean, and
hopefully just listening.
Right. Yeah. And maybe they found something that they want to give a chance, or they're like, I don't know. And now because we talked about it, they decide to have a go at it. So glad you sat down with me today. It's good to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Even though we're getting ready to record 2 more coming up here in a second. But if you're watching, listening, whatever, however I put this out, just remember, and I say this all the time because I say it every day at work. I know you got things going on, but seriously, focus on the positives. Life is really good. You have a lot of good things that you can focus on. Take care. We'll see you.